With the NBA season just about 2 weeks away, in this video, I'll be going over the biggest question for every NBA team for the upcoming 2022-2023 season. Starting off with the Atlanta Hawks, the biggest question is how will Trae Young and DeJounte Murray fit together? Trading for Murray was a major move for the Hawks this offseason, pairing two all-star guards to play together in the backcourt. Both Young and Murray have been successful as the primary ball handlers for their team, so sharing that responsibility will be a major adjustment for both of them. Trae's ability to be a threat as a shooter, even without the ball in his hands, should work when DeJounte Murray has the ball, and DeJounte will be able to cover up a lot of Trae's defensive liabilities. But there is potential for this duo to be, I would say, a worse version of Harden and Westbrook that year in Houston, where on paper the fit is awesome. It looks really good. But when it comes to actually playing basketball, playing NBA games together, will these guys be able to defer to each other in a way that actually contributes to winning? For the Boston Celtics, before the Ime Udoka news broke, I had the Celtics winning 60-plus games with Udoka winning Coach of the Year. Obviously, we know that Udoka is not even going to be near the discussion for Coach of the Year. But my question is, how much of a difference will the new coach actually make? The addition of Malcolm Brogdon fixes a lot of problems, you could say, that the Celtics had with their roster last year, but is missing Ime Udoka and all the internal drama that's going to go with that. Is that going to hurt their chances of making it back to the finals? The Brooklyn Nets. The Brooklyn Nets are in a unique situation because they could realistically win the championship this year. And at the same time, they could realistically miss the playoffs altogether. And it really comes down to this one question. Will Kevin Durant, Kyrie Irving, and Ben Simmons be 100% committed to playing basketball and doing whatever it takes to make it work? Number 4, the Charlotte Hornets. Let's be honest, the Hornets are going to be bad this year. Really bad. And now LaMelo's hurt. Looks like he's going to miss some time at the beginning of the season. So the biggest question for the Charlotte Hornets is LaMelo Ball going to be okay with putting up big stats on a really terrible team? Or could he be the next young stud to demand a trade? That's something to keep an eye on with Charlotte. The Chicago Bulls. The Bulls were 22-13 last season with Lonzo Ball. They were 24-23 without him. And as of now, nobody seems to really know when Lonzo's coming back. And even more than that, how's he going to look when he comes back from this injury? That's the biggest question. But in the meantime, will guys like Kobe White, Ayo Dosunmu, will they be able to hold it down while Lonzo is gone? Well, for the Cleveland Cavaliers, you could make a strong case that the Cavs won the NBA offseason when they traded for Donovan Mitchell without really having to give up any of their core. The defensive prowess of Evan Mobley and Jared Allen in the front court should be able to make up for some of the undersized issues, some of the issues that come with having an undersized backcourt with Donovan Mitchell and Darius Garland. But the question is this for the Cavs. Who's going to be that small forward? Who's going to be that 3? The Cavs have a couple options on their roster right now. Caris LeVert provides some size and some length. I think he's like 6'6", 6'7", at that position. Isaac Okoro is a little smaller, but he has shown some impressive defensive ability. And Dean Wade, he's big, he's tall, seems like a good shooter. He's gotten better, and he just got a contract extension with the Cavs. So the question is, are one of these guys going to step up to be that 3-and-D forward that's going to put that starting 5 all together and make the Cavs a legit top team in the league? Or is that number 3, is he going to be, is he a trade away? Maybe OG Anunoby. The biggest question for the Dallas Mavericks is, simply put, is Luka good enough to carry a team that deep in the playoffs? Losing Jalen Brunson hurts, but Christian Wood should help ease the pain. There are a few teams last season that finished last season in the standings behind the Mavs, and they made moves to make a big push past the Mavs in the standings. So is Luka alone enough to keep the Mavericks a top team in the West? Number 8, the Denver Nuggets. Nikola Jokic, everybody knows, is a back-to-back MVP. He played basically the entire last season without his two best teammates, Jamal Murray and Michael Porter Jr. So the biggest question for the Nuggets is, will these guys live up to expectations coming back from injury? And how will them playing, hopefully full-time, affect Jokic's production? Number 9, the Detroit Pistons. Cade Cunningham, Jaden Ivey, Sadiq Bey, Bojan Bogdanovic, Isaiah Stewart. That's the projected starting 5 for the Pistons this year. So the question for them is this. Is Cade that dude? Can he be the best player on a championship-level team? He's young. Right now, nobody really has any serious expectations for the Pistons. I think they're going to be a fun team to watch. I don't think anybody thinks they're really going to be competing for a top seed in the East or for like the finals, obviously. But Cade has got some talent around him. There's some good pieces on that team. And he has shown that he has the potential to be one of the top point guards in our league. So is he going to grow into that role this year or not? Cade is really the X factor for how far they're going to go. The Golden State Warriors. The Warriors are coming off their 4th championship in 8 years. Their core of Steph Curry, Klay Thompson, and Draymond Green are still around, but they are getting older. And there seems to be some contract issues with those three, specifically Draymond. At the same time, they have a collection of talented, promising young guys like Jordan Poole, Jonathan Kuminga, Moses Moody, and James Wiseman. So the question for the Warriors is, will they be able to defend the title? And if their young guys will be a crucial part of that. Especially I'm really looking at Kuminga, Moody, and Wiseman. How are they going to grow in this team? The Houston Rockets have a couple foundation pieces on their roster with Jalen Green and Jabari Smith. However, I don't expect them to win a lot of games this year. I don't think anybody does. So the question for the Rockets is Kevin Porter Jr. going to grow into a legitimate starting point guard? Or will the Rockets have to look elsewhere for that guy? Number 12, the Indiana Pacers. The Pacers are going to be a bottom team in the NBA this year. So at this point, the question isn't if Buddy Hield and Miles Turner will be traded. It's really when they will be traded and to which team. The Lakers. Seems to be some buzz there with Westbrook. There has been for a while, though. That's the problem. The LA Clippers. They have arguably underachieved the most since 2019 of any team in the league since they acquired Kawhi Leonard and Paul George. The expectation was that Kawhi and Paul George would lead the Clippers to the first championship in franchise history. But they have yet to even make a conference finals. You might be right to blame injuries for this underachieving, but nonetheless, my question for the Clippers is, assuming health, will the Clippers' depth be enough to get the job done come playoff time? Or will they consolidate some of their assets to trade for a third superstar caliber player? Going on to the LA Lakers, the question for them is it's just all about their big three. I still believe that if LeBron and AD, if they can each play 65 plus games, and if Russ is on the roster but he accepts a different role than what he is used to throughout his career, this team can probably win 40 games and make a push for the playoffs. And then who knows, once they're there, who knows what LeBron can do. Then, of course, there is the possibility that they do trade Westbrook. They go get Miles Turner and Buddy Hield. But if LeBron and AD miss a bunch of time, it doesn't matter who else is on the roster. Nothing besides those two playing 65-plus games, playing healthy, being strong on the court. Nothing else is going to make them anything close to a contender. Well, the Memphis Grizzlies, they surprised a lot of people last year. They were a great team, the 2 seed in the West. So the question for them this year is, will they be able to be even better than that? Or, now that there are expectations for this team, will they underachieve? They lost 2 rotation players this offseason in DeAnthony Melton going to Philadelphia in a trade for Danny Green, who's going to miss the whole season, and Kyle Anderson leaving in free agency to go to Minnesota. Jaren Jackson Jr. is going to be hurt for the start of the year. I think they're expecting him to be gone a couple months. So the Grizzlies seem to be expecting big jumps from Xavier Tillman and Zaire Williams. But will the Grizzlies be able to come close to last season's 56 wins, or will they see themselves fall in the standings? All right, we're halfway through the league. The Miami Heat, number 16. Will the Heat be buyers or sellers at the deadline? The Heat have been at the top of the Eastern Conference for years. As long as I can remember, they have been a competent team with a very obvious desire to win. But with the East getting so much better while they really didn't do anything, could the Heat find themselves being forced out of the playoff hunt? And if so, will they embrace the tank for Wembanyama halfway through the season? 17, the Milwaukee Bucks. Giannis Antetokounmpo is only 27 years old. But Chris Middleton is 31 and coming off an injury. Drew Holiday is 32. Wes Matthews is 35. George Hill is 36. Brook Lopez is 34. Serge Ibaka is 33. And Joe Ingles, who was really the only signing that the Bucks made this offseason, is 35 and also coming off a major injury. So the biggest question for the Bucks is simply, will their roster be healthy come the playoffs? They are good enough to compete for a championship this year, assuming they're healthy. But as these guys get older and they have more minutes under their belt, more miles on the court, these guys around Giannis are more likely to get hurt. So can they stay on the floor enough to end the season with home court advantage and stay healthy throughout the playoffs? The Minnesota Timberwolves made a historic trade this summer, trading for basically 5 first-round picks for Rudy Gobert. This is a crazy pairing, Rudy Gobert and Karl-Anthony Towns in the front court. So the question is, how will that duo fit together? An elite offensive center and an elite defensive center. How will they fit together? And more importantly, maybe, how will that duo affect Anthony Edwards? And the biggest question about the New Orleans Pelicans is obviously Zion Williamson. Is Zion going to be able to stay healthy and live up to expectations as an MVP caliber player this year or not? Moving on to the New York Knicks. The biggest question for the Knicks is this. If you're the Knicks, is it worth it to be a mediocre team? In my eyes, there are 7 teams in the East that are definitely better than the Knicks. So if the best case scenario for you is making the play-in tournament as the 8th seed, maybe squeeze into the playoffs and lose in the first round, is it worth it to try and be competitive? With the draft that's coming up next summer, I mean, you just signed Jalen Brunson, you extended RJ Barrett and Mitchell Robinson, so you've got those 3 guys under contract for years to come. So do you try to compete? Do you go all in this year for a playoff spot, a play-in spot even? Or are you better off tanking one more year and adding Victor Wembanyama or Scoot Henderson to your roster in the draft? The OKC Thunder. They're in a similar situation to the Hornets. Nobody expects them to be anything, but their future is a lot more promising since Chet Holmgren will hopefully be able to play next year, and they have just an outrageous number of draft picks that they have as assets. So the biggest question for the Thunder is, will Shai Gilgeous-Alexander be on their roster at the end of the season? Or might he demand a trade and be moved for even more future assets for the OKC Thunder? Josh Giddey looks like he could be the point guard of the future for this team, and there's some pretty impressive guard depth in this upcoming draft. So does that make Shai expendable to the Thunder as an asset that they can cash in on? Or maybe he just gets sick of losing in a market that's mostly overlooked. Will Shai be on the roster at the end of the year? That's the question. All right, Team 22, the Orlando Magic. The Orlando Magic have a bright future with first overall pick Paolo Banchero, and probably another top pick in this year's draft. So the question for them is which of their young players that they already have on the roster will be the best fit with Paolo. The Magic have an abundance of talent and youth on their roster, and in a year where they probably don't want to be super competitive anyways, they can afford to experiment with different lineups, see who will fit best with Paolo. Right? Will Markelle Fultz establish himself as a starting point guard of this team? Or will it be Jalen Suggs or Cole Anthony? Is Cole more of a shooting guard or a point guard? Who looks better at center next to Paolo? Is it Mo Bamba or Wendell Carter Jr.? Orlando has the luxury of experimenting with different combinations of players, and the guys who don't fit with Paolo, they don't fit into this vision of what they've got going forward, will be easy to trade for future assets. All right, getting there. The Philadelphia 76ers. Joel Embiid, assuming that he stays healthy throughout the season, will be an MVP candidate once again. The question for the 76ers is, will James Harden return to his superstar form? Because if he can be a top 3 or 4 guard in the NBA, with the depth that the 76ers added to the roster and the development of Tyrese Maxey, the 76ers could be legitimate championship contenders this year. But it comes down to what kind of James Harden do we see. For the Phoenix Suns, there are a lot of questions. Last year, they won 64 games. The year before that, they were in the finals. I don't think anyone expects them to come close to 64 wins this year, but the biggest question for the Suns is, will they even be a playoff team? There is little, if any, optimism for the Suns. DeAndre Ayton is eligible to be traded on January 15th. There are other players on the Suns that would be attractive to competitive teams. So will the Suns get it together and be legitimate contenders once again, or will we see a soft rebuild come the trade deadline? Well, despite nonstop media speculation, Damian Lillard has proven time and time again that he wants to be a member of the Portland Trail Blazers until he retires. He just signed a huge extension with his team, even though he's coming off a major injury, and he missed the entire season last year. The Blazers, they made some competitive moves this offseason, but the question is Damian Lillard still that dude who can lead a team to the playoffs? Or are the Blazers better off tanking for Wembanyama? All right, 5 more teams. Here we go. The Sacramento Kings at 26. The Sacramento Kings decided to go all in on the playoffs last year when they shocked the NBA by trading Tyrese Halliburton for Domantas Sabonis. However, it didn't work. They missed the playoffs once again, extending their streak of having the longest active playoff drought in the NBA. However, they ended up with the 4th pick in the draft this year. And they took Keegan Murray, who looks like a stud. Then they added Malik Monk and Kevin Huerter in free agency, which is great. Young shooters, right? Who doesn't want good young shooters on their team? So the biggest question for the Kings this year is, do they finally have enough to end their playoff drought? I think yes. Well, the only question that matters for the Spurs this year is, will they have the worst record in the NBA or the second worst record in the NBA? I think Devin Vassell is the most improved player candidate for them. I like Malachi Branham, their lottery pick this past season, but it's pretty clear that they are squarely in the Wembanyama race this season. Do they get the number 1 pick or number 2 pick? That's the question for the Spurs. The Toronto Raptors are interesting. They made the playoffs as a 5 seed last year. But the Eastern Conference got significantly better, and they didn't really make any significant moves. They had the assets to get Donovan Mitchell or Kevin Durant, but they weren't willing to trade Scotty Barnes. They have all their draft picks going forward. So the biggest question for the Raptors is, will they go all in on being competitive this year, or will they go all in on the future? Maybe even trading some of their better players, like OG Anunoby or Pascal Siakam, for future assets. The Utah Jazz. The Utah Jazz decided to blow it up this offseason by trading away their all-star duo of Rudy Gobert and Donovan Mitchell. Nobody expects veteran players like Mike Conley, Rudy Gay, and Jordan Clarkson to end the year with the Jazz, although they are still on the roster. So the question for Utah is which of their young players will prove themselves as building blocks for the future of the team? Utah has some interesting young guys like Nickeil Alexander-Walker, Jared Butler, Walker Kessler, Ochai Agbaji, and Johnny Juzang. These guys are going to have plenty of opportunities to be productive since the Jazz aren't trying to win a lot. So I'm interested to see who will take advantage of their situation, show off what they can do, and establish themselves as core pieces of the Utah Jazz for the future. Finally, the Washington Wizards. The Wizards believe that they have a roster that can be competitive. They made some bold moves by acquiring Kristaps Porzingis, re-signing Bradley Beal to the second largest contract in NBA history with a no-trade clause. So my question for the Wizards is, will they shock the world by making the playoffs, or will they flame out once again and get another top pick in the draft? Either scenario could happen. Well, there you have it. The biggest question for every NBA team this upcoming 2022 to 2023 season. Comment down below if you think I missed any questions or what your predictions are for how these questions will be answered. Like this video if you like NBA content, and subscribe to NBA Pack for more NBA predictions and commentary. Peace.